Derek Demeter began working at the Emil Buehler, which I don't think I'm pronouncing it correctly,
Buehler,
Planetarium at Seminole State College of Florida in 2003. By 2007, he was offered the position of Planetarium Director and immediately began the process of writing and producing new shows. And if you've ever been there, you should be thanking him for the awesome shows they have. Over much of the last decade, his passion for teaching people about the wonders of the universe has earned him accolades, recognition, both locally and in the planetarium industry overall. His peers, the community, you see him on the news and TV locally all the time. He formerly served as the president-elect of the Southeastern Planetarium Association. He enjoys promoting science beyond the planetarium work, as you can see him here, but he's also been with NASA's Astronomy Picture of the Day website, which is pretty cool, and if you follow him on Facebook, his pictures are incredible. So we're very pleased and happy to have Derek kick off our January. I think this means it's going to be an awesome year here for the CFFC to start with such a wonderful speaker. So please give a warm welcome to Derek.
Thank you, Jocelyn, and thank you, David, and thank you everybody here at the Central Florida Freethought community for having me out and talk a little about some science misconceptions. And the most important part actually is is how to deal with them. I think that's kind of a little bit of background. As I said, I've been running the planetarium for over 15 years, but actually used to work at the Orlando Science Center at the Province Observatory before that. I actually started as a volunteer when I was 13, so just a tad bit shorter than I am now. I have more facial hair, so at least there's that feeling for me. It's amazing what facial hair, for at least for someone like me, before I had a beard, I was seen as a student, now I'm seen as a professor. So that's the secret, that's the secret, for me anyways. What I wanted to talk about today is not necessarily, debunking science. I mean, it's kind of preaching to the choir to many of you here. What I really wanted to talk about today is primarily how to deal with communicating things like science and just the world around us to people that, might think the world a little bit differently. For example, one of the most common things that's been happening these days is the flat Earth. I have been seeing over the last 15 years at the planetarium a slow increase of people thinking that the Earth is flat. The Flat Earth Society has actually been around a lot longer. Some of you probably remember Flat Earth's been around quite some time, but with the traction of the internet and things like that, we're slowly seeing more and more people following this. And I'll talk a little bit about the real deep behind why people believe the Earth is flat. And believe it or not, a lot of the people I've talked to over my years about flat Earth, it really has nothing to do with the flat Earth. It has more to do with their view of the government. And that rabbit hole they fall into leads them to things like flat Earth and stuff like that. So I'll go into that and how we can deconstruct their logic and reconstruct them to start maybe convincing them otherwise, or help them convince them otherwise. But anyways, flat Earth is a very big thing that's starting to grow. I'm seeing this a lot more at the planetarium. People challenging me about flat Earth and all the theories they know about that. The other one that is actually growing too, is some of you might not know about this, but there is a theory that at least they believe the Earth is round, so at least we got that going. But they think that the Earth actually was much smaller, about the size of Mars. Mars is about 1/3 the size of the Earth, and has slowly, like a balloon, expanded and has basically become the Earth today. Yes, this is real. This is not fake. And there's actually a whole YouTube video about this. Actually, it's come from that YouTube video. You can have fun, watch it, get some popcorn, enjoy this little bit of fiction there. But there are people that have this notion that the Earth is actually growing and pretty much refutes plate tectonics or anything else like that. So I would like to ask how they would be able to answer the whole Puerto Rico earthquake thing. That'd be interesting. So. Also, there's a lot of people that think dinosaurs and humans exist. And now I was a kid of the 80s, so I love Dino Riders. This was awesome, all right? The idea of humans battling against dinosaurs and all that stuff, that's really cool. But there are people that really think that dinosaurs and humans coexisted, and I actually get quite a few of them at the planetarium that think that the Earth is 6,000 years old, and that we and humans live together. And actually, just this past Saturday, I had a group at the planetarium where a gentleman who actually, for some of you that might know me personally, one of my hobbies is fossil hunting. I like to go out and scuba dive and find fossils and stuff like that, and we kind of bonded on that. But I discovered when I started talking about, yeah, I just found a 2 million year old thing, he's like, oh, well, the Earth's actually only 6,000. At first I thought he was joking. I thought he was being sarcastic or whatever. But no, he was not. And we started getting into some interesting dialogue, and I'll talk about how I handled that later on. So we're not, we're seeing a growing change of people believing that vaccines are dangerous. The irony of it is, and actually my friend just sent me this meme the other day saying that the more scientifically advanced we are, the less people believe in science, which is kind of weird, because imagine if we did have a time machine and we took one of these amazing vaccines back to like even the 1800s and gave children, they would think that we were, angels or something. God, God sent us down here, right? But today, because we have the luxury of having vaccines and, basically not having to worry about these things like polio and, all these other smallpox and those other crazy things that we kind of take for granted. And what we're seeing a lot too, and what I've been seeing over the years, is that when you kind of aren't used to dealing with the emotional attachment to it, you kind of go meh about it. For example, we're starting to see a growing increase of people thinking the Holocaust didn't exist. But that's because a lot of these people are growing up with people that weren't affected with the Holocaust, or maybe their grandparents died off before they were born and they didn't have the feeling of having an emotional attachment to somebody that had to deal with it. So you're starting to see this start to creep into our society. The same goes with vaccines. More and more people, think about this. I always ask people who are anti-vaxxers if they were vaccinated, and they always usually say yes. And well, nothing happened to you, right? But they don't think about it that way. They just think because they have that emotional attachment. Usually a lot of anti-vaxxers are because they have children that had an allergic reaction to the vaccine, right? Of course, I'm allergic to onions. Do I want to ban all onions because they're evil? No, I just happen to have an allergic reaction to onions. We shouldn't ban that for everybody else because there are people that need vaccines. There are cases where there are obviously allergic reactions to vaccines, but that's a pretty small minority. But that's not what I'm going to spend the next time talking. And of course, one of the biggest issues of today is climate change. And this is something that I'm going to use a lot in my talk today, because I think, in my personal opinion, this is one of the biggest issues we have facing us in the 21st century. And I really do. Because without a planet, all the other stuff that we want to fight about or whatever is worth nothing. So I'm going to talk about this because it's very important to me. And since I'm the talker, that's what I'm going to talk about. The speaker I'm going to talk about. But this is very important, and this is something that we're seeing this happen. In fact, just recently, if you follow Orlando Weekly, they just did a Facebook post, and it was really shocking to see how many people came out and attacked people for their climate change deniers, attacking people about this. And it just went into some crazy arguments that it just boggles my mind. So long story short, this talk is not about trying to debunk these things. Again, preaching to the choir to many of you. What I really want to do is I want to provide some ways to help when you have discussions with people that, maybe your family members, your friends, your former roommates, maybe an alien that abducted you, whatever the person is, that you can have better ways of potentially getting some influence on them, how to influence them at least a little bit. Now, a couple of disclaimers. Number one, this is more of a personal relationship or a personal communication. As I said, I'm a science communicator. That's my job. I go around teaching science and trying to get people to understand science. So I don't want to discredit political activism. I don't want to discredit marches and things like that. But this is more of a way that we can communicate with fellow human beings and try to get them to understand both sides and to hopefully be able to kind of influence their mindset. And sometimes we may not. And I'm going to talk about how we can cope with that ourselves, and also hopefully we can maybe one day change the world and bring science to the universe. There you go. So there we are. Now, before I begin, I want to talk a little bit of a personal anecdote about a gentleman I used to work at the Orlando Science Center with. And this is kind of like the story behind my talk. Back when I was 13, I joined the Orlando Science Center. First off, this gentleman is one of my highest, I just revere this man. He's a mentor to me. He kind of gave me the spark that became who I am today. He is a brilliant person in terms of knowledge of astronomy. He's very good about communicating it. So I really hold high respect for this gentleman. However, when we started talking when I was around that age, he started to kind of leak some ideas of his personal beliefs, and he discovered that I heard that he said, "Oh, evolution is a bunch of rubbish." And what really boggled my mind at a 13-year-old level was how in the world could a man talking about the evolution of galaxies, the formations of stars, all these things, and then all of a sudden he thinks evolution is baloney. How could somebody wrap their brain on that? The knowledge of science that this person had, but couldn't come to cope with the idea that evolution was hooky pooky. That's a scientific word, so you know, I see it in the dictionary. But the question, yeah, exactly. But long story short, the ending of the story, kind of give you a little bit of a spoiler. It does actually end up where he slowly does start to accept it. But the question is how? How did he go through that process? And that's where I'm kind of use him throughout the presentation to kind of help maybe use that as a motivator to help you know that there is hope for some when it comes to changing their minds on things. But a lot of it has to do with the fact that that's one thing that I've discovered when a lot of times when I do events, I see people on both sides and they start arguing and start bashing at each other and stuff like that. I'm noticing over the years, and I could be wrong with this, but this is based on my observations as being somebody that works in this field and go around and talk to all different people. We just did a library tour last year. We visited 80 libraries around the state of Florida, talked to lots of different children of all different racial groups, social classes, everything. I mean, basically they run the whole gamut of people. And what I've noticed with a lot of people is that, especially when you start arguing about these things, is there's this lack of empathy that I start seeing with a lot of people. Is that when I was thinking about my mentor, I thought like trying to really understand how he thought, what was going in his life that led him to really think evolution was garbage or crazy. And we really need to stop sometimes to think about putting ourselves in the shoes of that person. Why does this person think the earth is flat? Why does this person think, that vaccines are going to kill people and or whatever the case may be? Why do people, you could insert word here essentially. So really I think the first step with really truly kind of influencing somebody is trying to get yourself in their shoes, trying to figure out what's their logic, what are they thinking, maybe there is no logic, but try to at least somehow get a better picture of what's going on with this individual to kind of start bringing about kind of potentially change in their way of thinking. So I think that's one of the most important things is I think we're starting to lose that empathy collectively because we as individuals want to be the one that is right. And how many of you, by a show of hands, and I'm one of them, by the way, I will be the first to admit that when I was a young kid, I was that know-it-all annoying kid, okay? Where that kid, shut up, I don't care, I was having to correct everybody that you can imagine because they had the wrong information. And we, a lot of times, like to be the one that's right. And I was guilty of this for a long time. I wanted to be the person who proves people wrong. I wanted to show people. I went into this field hoping to be like a Neil deGrasse Tyson, trying to prove people that they're wrong and we're going to teach you the right way and that kind of thing. And what happened is, as over the years, I started to really, truly become more empathetic of people. Try to go, why are they thinking that way? Why do they have that? So I think that's one of the most important things that you can start off with in terms of really gathering. And so I tried to do that with my mentor over the years. Over the last 20 years, I've tried to understand the empathy of him. But the other thing is what I've discovered is that we human beings have a lot of cognitive dissonance. And essentially my mentor had cognitive dissonance with this. So for those cognitive dissonance, basically, a good example of this is, cigarette smoking is bad, but I'm smoking a cigarette, essentially. Or, those doctors who are like, oh, you shouldn't be eating fat, it's bad, or whatever, and then they're like, obese. So it's kind of like, well, we're doing something, but, you're trying to preach fact, but you have a belief system. Well, with my friend, he was born in a family that was very religious, and he would attend church, and he liked that feeling of believing in God, and God was, and he always said things like, God showed me in his way that proved to me that God exists. I always ask him, what is it about God that you believe in God, but you understand science? He's like, God has come in my life some way that I can't denounce that, or whatever it was. So he already established a belief system in his brain. And we human beings like to find patterns and examples that fuel that belief system. And I think a lot of times when it comes to misconceptions like flat Earth and stuff like that, what I discover is that a lot of these individuals have a belief system, and they find things, they cherry pick to find that belief system. That's why you always find people who watch Fox News, that's all they watch is Fox News, because they have a certain belief system, and then they're homed in onto that belief system, and they're pretty much sucked in. They're going down that rabbit hole. So the question is that, well, when it comes to my friend, that belief system is he had a belief in God, and he tried to create a system that worked really well. He would always say little small things that kind of seemed off when it came to science. And what I find with a lot of people who believe in pseudoscience topics and things like that, what I've noticed over the years is that they have a very strong belief system, and usually it's not the thing that you think it is. Case in point with Flat Earth Society. A lot of the people that are part of Flat Earth Society actually attended one of these conferences for the Flat Earth, so I was curious. A lot of them are anti-government, or they're paranoid. They are paranoid people. And fear is a very powerful thing. You find a lot of people who are afraid of vaccines or fearful of something happening. All these different things, Flat Earth, they're fearful the government is controlling them. The government created a simulation that's making, but because they actually think the other planets are round, by the way. They think that the other planets are round. They just think Earth is flat because we're in a simulation. Have you ever seen the movie Dark City? It's like a space station that they live on. That's what we think we're on, like a space station, or like the Truman Show. We're on a stage thing. The government's taking control of us. Same thing with the moon landing hoax. Most of the people, when you break it down, when you start dissecting their logic, it all boils down to the thesis of the government cannot be trusted, and I don't trust the government. And this is one of the prime examples of why I can't trust the government, is because I found out that the moon landing is a hoax. And so what they're doing is they're cherry-picking their logic. They're taking ideas that they already set aside a belief system, and now they're figuring out a way to put in those holes. Obviously, that's not science, right? We scientists don't do that. We don't come up with a hypothesis and then go around and look and cherry-pick ideas. There's a lot of times when we come up with hypotheses that don't come out right. For example, the speed of light. Back in the late 1800s, there was experiments that believed that the space was made up of the ether. But then found out that by doing experiments at the speed of light, we found out that that's not the case. That speed of light happens in all directions, every direction, so therefore we disproved the ether. So science does obviously lead to potentially things that go against your guess or hypothesis. Not in the case of pseudoscientists and science people that believe in the flat Earth and all the creationisms. They look for things that already fit their belief system. So I think that's one of the most important things. So now that we kind of have this idea that we know that that's just how it works, the other thing that's going bad today is because access of information has become very, very, very readily available. Imagine back in the day we had to go to a library to look up books, and if somebody didn't write a book about that, you wouldn't really know about it. But today there are people that can just publish a web page, boom, done. So the amount of information that's accessible these days, which by the way is beautiful because now I can go into my phone and I can look up something real quick, but there's also a lot of terrible information out there. Like, for example, this is actually a quote somewhere in one of the websites that I've read. Don't believe everything you see on the internet, Abraham Lincoln. If Abraham Lincoln was here today, he might actually say that. Who knows? But this is something that also fuels that belief system. Now we have these people that have this belief system that they create for themselves, this cognitive dissonance, and all of a sudden now they're looking for all this evidence to suggest their beliefs. So that makes them more ingrained in those belief systems. So when you encounter somebody that has this kind of mentality, it's hard to really get your ideas across to them because they literally attach themselves to this belief system. There's no way of getting out of it. So what I'm going to get at later on in the talk is that sometimes you might, my phrase here is you might lose the battle, but you can win the war. And that's a very powerful statement because a lot of times we get impatient with people. We want them to know now. We want them to know that their ideas are wrong and they need to be proved in right now. But this can take years for people to finally come out, take the red pill and finally come out of the matrix. It takes a long time for people to become self-aware, especially if their belief system is really ingrained in them. The other thing that's happening today too is that we are becoming more and more tribalized. What I mean by that is that how many of you notice on Facebook or any other Twitter, it's just a battle against them, you against me. Your idea is better than my idea. And we see this happen with religions for years and years and years. My God's better than your God, and all that. And so now we're coming up with these ideas like the right-wing people hate the libtards, as they call them, or the more liberal thinking people call the conservatives Trump, whatever. And it starts to just become this bashing of left and right. But how many of you that are old enough remember having barbecues with friends or hanging out with friends, and they might have totally different beliefs than you, and it was kind of okay. Does anyone remember that? It was kind of okay to have, but now, no, I'm not going to go to that event because Jake's going to be there and he believes that this thing. I'm like, no, we want to separate ourselves so much today, where we create these artificial rivers and where we can't actually talk to people. And I think that's the most important thing, is we're losing our ability to properly communicate to people and just have one-on-one discussions or just group discussions with people if they don't believe in what we believe in, and all of a sudden we run into these issues. So we're running into a lot of issues. We're running into a lot of people are just having these belief systems. They're finding more information about it online, and then all of a sudden that becomes, you discover that person that believes in what you believe in is somewhere else. Now you can connect with them, and now we're starting to develop tribes. We're starting to develop little niches of people, and that just further reinforces our beliefs. And now all of a sudden we're not in wars with countries, we're in war with each other. If you think about it, how many of you have family members who are like, I'm not going to a reunion because I know, my brother's there and I hate my brother because he thinks the earth is flat, whatever. So, same thing. So we're starting to see this happen a lot. So the question is how can I influence people now? We're in such a huge problem now where people are getting their beliefs reinforced. What can I do as a communicator of science, or somebody who just has a view of the world that kind of is based off of peer-reviewed research and things like that aren't just reviewed on somebody writing a website? How can I get my ideas across to these people? And that's where we get into the next part of the program. These are the three most things that I hear all the time, and I'm guilty of every single one of them, okay? I personally am guilty of every single one of them. The most ineffective ways to influence people. Number one is name calling. How many of you notice on Facebook you hear libtards, cheetah man, whatever the case may be? The first thing people do is they use their emotional response. If they don't like something, it makes you feel good to call somebody by name. I mean, you remember when you were a little kid, you're like, he has a booger head. If you didn't like somebody, you called him boogerhead or whatever. It's just, we just like to do that. We like to put somebody in a box and make them feel less because it makes us feel good, which gets into my next case here later on. So name calling is usually, you hear that a lot. And when let's say you get name called, how does that make you feel? Let's say somebody calls you a boogerhead. What does it make you feel? Don't even think about it. Just how does it make you feel in that moment? Makes you feel like crap, right? Doesn't make you feel good. Being name called no matter what doesn't make you feel good. It's offensive. Defensive. Defense is a great word, yeah, because that puts on that shield. Makes it even more harder to break down that barrier, to make them start to think, to make you feel, to convince them things, right? So yeah, name calling is definitely is one that I've done when I was a kid, especially when I got angry and I couldn't control my emotions a little bit more than I can today. Arguing and winning, that's another big one. How many of you love the art of arguing so you can win and be the most victorious person of all? Yes. Newsflash for you, I'm guilty of this one. It doesn't work very well, okay? In fact, it makes people hate you even more. And you're like, why do I only have 3 friends on my Facebook now? Maybe it's because you're an argumentative person. It's like, oh, I don't want to see Derek today because, we're going to get in that argument about cats or something. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just some really ridiculous thing. Arguing does not solve the problem. Arguing does not solve a problem. When wanting to argue to win, it makes it worse. And we're going to talk about ways that you can actually better, talk with people on that. And bombarding someone with facts. If you're somebody who has to prove somebody with a bunch of facts that they know nothing about, that's also going to make them extremely defensive because they're going to be like, I don't know what this person's talking about. And so I'm just going to shut down. I'm going to shut down. And I'm not going to listen to him. It goes, the ear just closes. The ear just closes. And now all of a sudden you lost them. By the way, there have been studies that show that the average American has about a 6th grade level in science knowledge. So if you start using neutron degeneracy of black holes or, the Eocene period had a much warmer time period and there was all these different fossils, you lost already a bit. You lost people. When I do general astronomy programs, I keep it at a 6th grade level for most people. Now, usually if I'm in a group like you all, where it's a little bit, different, then I can go, you kind of modify it. But for the average, astronomy festival event, you keep it at a certain level because you will lose people if you start getting into lots of facts and figures that people just don't know and understand. So that is also not a very ineffective way to influence people. So the question is how can you influence people? Now, I will say this, I am not the only definitive, I'm not a guru in this, okay? I'm not like, the definitive, this is just what has worked for me. And I have been able to influence people, including my mentor, over the years to start seeing the understanding the world in a more scientific way and getting away from these pseudoscience beliefs. And I have actually had people that come to see my planetarium shows on climate change that actually have come up to me and said, you know what, I understand it now. I think climate change is an issue. And so what I'm trying to say is there is some credibility in the sense that I have tried and I've messed up quite a bit over the years. So I said I've been doing this for 15 years, so I've screwed up a lot. But over the years, I've been able to finally have a better way of understanding how to influence people. And I hope that maybe some of these ideas may help you out in the future so you don't rip your head out when you're talking to your brother about anti-vaccines or something like that. So. All right, so first things first is this is the most important one of all. Okay, it's one of the most important one of all. This one took me years to finally accept, and I'm still having problems with it today, okay, is your ego. Most of the time when you argue with your friends, family, and all that, it makes you feel good, right? Doesn't it make you feel good because you know everything and you want to prove that person that they're wrong? It's an ego thing. It's an ego thing. And that is the worst thing you can do. If you're trying to get somebody to influence somebody to make you feel good, then you're not doing it right. And this was something that I had to work on for years because I wanted to be that know-it-all. I wanted to be the science guy. And I started realizing that, you know what, my job is just to provide good information to people and hope that maybe they see it and understand it, and maybe that makes a world a better place. Instead of saying, you know what, I want to do it because I want to be the know-it-all science guy, and I'm just happy that they learned from me. Even though it's kind of funny here, I'm here and talking to you about stuff. But you know what, whatever, okay? Okay, I know. But no, I'm here to hope that I've learned over the years my mistakes, and I'm hoping that maybe this might help you all with it. So that's kind of the reason why I'm doing it today. So if you're able to check your ego at the door when you have arguments with these people, and you just realize, okay, I'm going to be more empathetic about this. I'm going to learn about why this person believes they do, and forget about if I have to win this or not, because chances are I'm not going to change their beliefs, which, by the way, you usually never do on the first talk with somebody. You never always change their beliefs on the first talk. That's the number one rule, too. You're never going to win the battle. You might win the war, but you're not going to win the battle. If you can accept that and you can plant a seed in them, maybe, just maybe, that seed will grow into something else. And that's what I'm going to get with my mentor. I started slowly but surely kind of asking questions to my mentor over the years about things. And what happened over the years is that a plant did grow in his brain. And I'll go into that at the end of the program. So number one thing is checking your ego at the door. If you can just get away from yourself and say, you know what, I'm here just to be with this person in this moment, not worried about winning, not worried about being that person that knows everything, maybe, just maybe, you can start planting a seed. One thing I've learned over the years is that I don't know everything either. I don't know everything either. In fact, I tried to become this know-it-all kid, but then I realized I can't know it all. It's impossible. And in fact, actually, I've been corrected multiple times by other people, including some people in this room. And that's okay. I can't know everything. I won't know everything, and it's okay to do that. But even people who are considered more scientifically literate get it wrong too. For example, I see some people who are really into science, really know stuff, and wear t-shirts like this. That's why I have the t-shirt on there. Is there something wrong with this t-shirt?
Pluto's not dead.
Pluto's not dead. We didn't kill Pluto. It wasn't like we took Star Killer Base and blew it up. Okay? We didn't blow up Pluto. But if you imagine if you're somebody below your literacy in science and he saw that and you were a speaker about science and you wore that shirt, that person now believes that you think that, and therefore it reinforces their idea that Pluto's dead. I had a 6-year-old girl come up to me after a planetarium program and said, my dad told me that we got rid of Pluto. I'm like, what do you mean we got rid of Pluto? He said, yeah, the government got rid of Pluto. I'm like, what? We didn't get rid of Pluto, but what she meant is that we reclassified Pluto. We didn't get rid of it, we just reclassified it. But there are a lot of people that think Pluto is not a planet, we got rid of it. I even had somebody leave a message to me and said, I'm just so angry that Pluto is not a planet and it's not there anymore. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Here's a picture from the 2015 New Horizons spacecraft. Thank you. But that's another thing too, is that there are people that are considered what we quote unquote call smart and informed that still wear shirts like this and find it funny. And it's not teaching anybody good science. And that's why, and also a lot more people are not trusting scientists anymore, is because they're arrogant, they think they know everything, and when they're missed, and then all of a sudden there's a YouTube video that says 15 ways scientists got it wrong, and they come off as arrogant and not humble, then all of a sudden we lose trust in our scientists. So that's another reason. I hear this people, a lot of people say, I don't like Neil deGrasse Tyson because he's arrogant. He thinks he knows everything. That's the reason. I don't like Bill Nye the Science Guy because he likes to go on the show and make people who don't believe in his thing, he just basically rags on them the whole time. These are serious concerns. And these are things that would lead people to not believe in science too. And so if we can try to avoid these kind of things, that's good. Another thing is I hear a lot of people say that pterodactyls are dinosaurs. Scientifically literate people call pterodactyls dinosaurs. But the real dinosaur is this duck. Avian dinosaurs. Yes, a duck is a dinosaur. Pterodactyls, not dinosaurs. All right, kind of crazy. So when we go to Orlando Wetlands, we're going to be doing a dinosaur watch. Okay, don't call it bird watching anymore. Call it dinosaur watching. You'll get a lot more kids excited about birding than you would bird watching. Because I'm telling you right now, my friend who told me I was a bird watcher, he said, you'll come off as a bird watcher. You're not one of these. You're not generally an elderly person that wears a camera and all that stuff. No, we're going to call it dinosaur watching from now on. I guarantee you that's going to get kids not care about birds, all of a sudden care about birds, okay? So just do it. Try it. See what happens. Please. I beg you. Save the birds, people. We want to save the birds. People don't care about birds because they're birds. We can call them dinosaurs. Everybody cares now. So, and another one is, can any of you, all right, let's do a science quiz here. Anybody know the name of this molecule? This one right here. That is not water.
Dioxide.
That's carbon dioxide. Yes, carbon dioxide. What about this one here? It looks like Mickey Mouse.
Water.
Now that's water. And then this one? Methane. All right. So, a lot of scientifically literate people say climate change is caused by carbon dioxide. And I said, well, what else? I'm like, well, that's it. It's all I heard on the radio. It's carbon dioxide. But these two are actually worse than carbon dioxide, and we're actually putting that stuff out there too. Cows, they release a lot of methane, and water, we're dumping a lot of water vapor up there too. So, and actually that's what killed Venus, by the way. Venus is dead now because of all the excess water vapor that was in the atmosphere after it got too hot. So if we start evaporating the oceans more and more, it actually is going to make it warmer. So that's something that usually people don't think about when it comes to climate. And by the way, climate is one of those things, which we'll get to later on, that when we get to the middle ground part of my talk, that climate change is something that you can actually argue and maybe win over people quicker than you think. So now that we got our ego checked and we accept the fact that we don't know everything and we may learn from somebody else, the most important thing is being an active listener and building trust. How many of you, if you start hearing somebody talk about the earth is created 6,000 years old, wait for my turn so I can just tell them all that crap that I know. How many of you do that? Show of hands. It's okay. I do it too. Trust me. I cringe. I do a lot of this motion. You know, I start snapping my finger. Okay. Start doing a dance. And then I wait for my turn and I can just tell them, you're wrong. Okay. So the worst thing we can do is not be an active listener. By the way, newsflash, most people don't want to hear about what you have to say. Most people want to just talk about what they're interested in. Case in point, I have a friend of mine, fossil hunter. He spent 3 hours just talking to me the whole time. And I said, yeah, great. That's cool, awesome. At the end of that conversation, he says, man, I had a great time with you. We had a really great conversation, didn't we? Yeah, we did, yeah. It was great. I basically said the same thing I've been saying for the last 3 hours. But I built trust in him, and he messaged me the next day. He's like, I can't wait to hang out with you again sometime. I established an emotional bond of trust with this person. And the whole time I just learned about, yeah, that's great, yeah, that's cool, awesome, yeah. And asking questions like, what kind of thing did you find? I didn't even mention anything that I did or whatever, and that's okay. For the first initial reaction of meeting somebody, just let them dump on you. And just seem interested. Even if you're not interested, just pretend to be interested and ask questions. And build trust. This is the most important thing. The reason why is because my mentor accepted evolution later on in life because he built trust with me. Because, by the way, he is a talker. He can talk your head off about things. And I just let him talk. Just let him talk. Just let him talk. And I did the ask some questions. And eventually, I was able to finally build trust in him. You know why? Because what happened eventually, when I got older, I said, hey, I would love for you to come to one of my planetarium programs, or I'd love to come to you to talk. And he showed up because he liked me. And guess what I was able to do after that? I was able to bring him to my arena. I was able, I wanted to find some cool science arena, but I couldn't do that. I was thinking about putting the like Star Wars thing in there, but it's all right. You want to bring them, you want to captivate them, you want to build them trust so that way they may be able to come into your arena. Now, I have a planetarium, I'm fortunate to have that, and you might not have that. But you might have another event that you're going to that you might say, hey, and maybe show up to some of their events, even though you're cringing at it, but maybe, just maybe say, hey, I got this event coming up here, it's for Freethought community thing, I would love you to be there, some really cool people to meet, whatever the case may be, they may show up. They may show up, and so when you bring them to the arena, then it's your turn. They've been yapping at you for hours, and you've been going, yeah. Now they have to forcefully listen to you or forcefully be in that environment. Now, I have a friend of mine who's also another kind of interesting. Fossil hunters tend to be religious earlier, and then they kind of, Anyways, I have a friend of mine. He was a Jehovah's Witness when he was a kid, and he married his wife at 18 and all that stuff, and he's really devout in the church. But he was in an arena himself. He was in an environment in northern Florida where he was exposed to all these creeks and stuff, got into scuba diving, and discovered fossils. And you know what they were. At first, he was into young earth creationism, and he thought that they were sort of related to humans and things like that. But then he started to go and start questioning them himself, and he built trust through a friend of his who was a professor at UF, and he started to build a relationship with him. He would just show off his fossils, talk to him for forever and all that, and the professor would listen and then would slowly kind of say, here's a book you should read, here's a book you should read, here's something else, here's come over to the museum sometime and check out fossils. And what he did over time was build trust and become an active listener, and eventually invited him to his arena and allowed him to eventually discover that a lot of the stuff he did was actually, what led him to believe that, now he's an atheist. So there you go. So he went from Jehovah's Witness to an atheist. And so as you can see, things can change. You can lose the battle, but you can win the war. Remember that. Remember that expression. If you start hearing somebody, just think about that. The most important thing, too, is also find a middle ground. Yes, that's actually Jean-Claude Van Damme. He did do this, okay? This is a real thing. Go on YouTube, type in Jean-Claude Van Damme, 2 trucks. It's not a prank. Okay. This is actually him. He actually did this. They did this as a real stunt. He's actually doing like a whole it's crazy, yeah. But find the middle ground. So for example, go back to climate change. So how many times do you hear people saying, "Oh, climate happens naturally"? Climate happens naturally. How many? Come on, you have to have heard this, right? Here's the middle ground. You ready? This is what I usually tell people. And this is what I told that person in my show at the planetarium. Climate does change naturally. Volcanoes erupt. We have huge ash blooms. We have methane releases of gases in the swamps. It does happen naturally. Have you ever wondered, though, that if we add humans into it, cars, don't they release carbon dioxide? Don't volcanoes release carbon dioxide? And slowly but surely, what I explained to them is this: climate is happening naturally. We're just the sriracha sauce, and we're pouring it into the recipe. And that blew his mind. He just did not accept the fact, because he was watching Fox News and stuff like that, and he found out that all they talk about is humans are causing climate change. They don't acknowledge the fact, and a lot of scientists don't acknowledge to people like that they're right. And if you say, you're right, climate does happen naturally, you're right, 100%. You then release their guard. They take that defensive mechanism off, and you acknowledge that they're right for a change. And if you're humble about it, and you say, you're right, and you reinforce their ideas, and just add a question to it, which, by the way, leads to my next thing, asking them questions about their logic, then all of a sudden maybe they might start thinking about what they thought about, and all of a sudden have a aha moment. Have you all had an aha moment before in your life, that all of a sudden that light switch is turned on, and you see the light? Not literally, but figuratively. I try sometimes, okay, I try. That might happen with that individual. They just need that light to turn on at that moment in time. And you might be that person who's able to ask those questions and break down their logic. Because essentially the end result is you help them deconstruct their thinking and reconstruct their logic. For example, my mentor came to a couple of my planetarium talks. And I talked about life forms on other planets, and we had a show about dinosaurs and talked about evolution. And eventually, he was able to understand, he had that aha moment that maybe, just maybe, life can form on other planets just like life could form on other worlds, and why would God do that if we were special? So eventually, he actually had an aha moment, and he built it himself. And by the way, the end result, the last part of this talk I want to talk about, is that you are not going to be the one that's going to get them to see the light. They have to see the light. And that's where I said, take your ego out of the window. You're not in it to make them convinced. They have to convince themselves, and you have to be trustworthy, humble, willing to accept and actively listen to them. And maybe, just maybe, if you plant the seed in the right time, something will click. And just like happened to my mentor, he finally now accepts evolution as a theory. And he actually came up to me and says, I understand now. Even over the years said, evolution is rubbish. So it could take years, but eventually, maybe, just maybe, the light may be activated. So again, if you can just plant that seed, who knows? But the problem is that my buddy said to me, devil's advocate, he says, Derek, the problem though is that we live in a society where people that believe in these things have a lot of influence on the world. This is true. But a certain individual who I'm married to, she was a Sarah Palin fan back when she was a teenager. She believed she was a conservative. Now she's a devout, atheist, and she was a young Earth creationist. But she had she would vote for Donald Trump if she was in that time of her life, right? Or maybe people that want Bible laws put in, in Florida. But people can change. If you plant those seeds slowly, those people may one day vote those people out in the future. And then of course, political activism and marching and stuff is very helpful. It's very good to have a loud voice every once in a while to get people to go, what's going on? But if we do it in a way that isn't so aggressive and name-calling and telling people that are stupid, and we accept them more, then maybe we can win. Maybe we can actually use the qualities that Christianity should be teaching, where we're supposed to love each other and listen to each other and love thy neighbor and all that stuff that people don't actually really do, right? So maybe we can one day hopefully achieve a better good. That's the end of the day. So that's kind of my personal take on this, and I hope that maybe some of these ideas work for you, and maybe I would love to hear your ideas. Maybe there's things that I don't know that you have been successful that maybe I could use for my work as a science communicator. So before we end here, I want to lead some really cool books about some of the things that we just talked about. Of course, a lot of you probably know Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. There's tons of other great books out there. They're not listed, but I recommend that you maybe check them out and maybe read them on. Maybe that might help you with influencing people in the future. So thank you all very much for having me out, and have a great rest of your day.